morning, and welcome to the October 3rd Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg. My name is Reverend Ben Atherton Zeman, and I am the minister here. I want to give a special welcome to anyone who is new to our community. If you're looking for a church where women's rights are human rights, where religious leaders like me don't get to tell women what to do with their own bodies, where our feminism is intersectional, I have good news. You may have found your church home. I mention women's rights because by the time you watch this video, many of our community will have marched in the Women's March in St. Petersburg yesterday. So I want to thank all of you who attended and marched behind our UUSP banner with me. Actually, go ahead and write in the text chat right now if you were there. Say, I was there. Even if you weren't there, write in the text chat, say hello, let us know where you are in the world. Now, to provide accessibility, closed captioning is available on this YouTube service on most devices and operating systems. You'll find the CC icon in the lower right portion of your screen. And I'm always happy to be joined by John Arterton, our music director, and James Mack, who puts it all together. Kermit and Elmo will be coming back for the Time for All Ages, and Janae Johnson has given her blessing for that. Now, some of you have been wondering who's doing the voices of Kermit and Elmo, and it's a good question. Some of you have wondered, is it one person? Is it two people? Who do you think's doing the voices? You're already in the text chat. Let us know who you think it is. I guess there's a poll going on in our Facebook group for UUSP members and friends. Now, our flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It's a symbol of hope, of the sacred, of the quest for truth, the warmth of community, the light of reason, so much more. But before I light our chalice, let's take a moment of silence to center ourselves for the worship service. Thank you. Now please join me in saying our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Jamie just let me know she's unable to do the reading today, and I am happy to do it because I'm a huge fan of Audre Lorde, who described herself as a black lesbian mother warrior poet. This is called the Litany for Survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Hello everyone, Kermit the Frog here, still excited to be at the UU Church of St. Petersburg, yay! Emma's very excited, Emma's excited for the Women's March this Saturday. Yeah, that's right, Elmo, we're taping this before the actual Women's March happens, so when most people see this on Sunday, it will have already happened. Emma hopes that so many people went to the Women's March at Vinoy Park at 4 p.m. on Saturday. Yes, I hope that happened as well. And today's worship service is about domestic violence and embracing healthy relationships. Oh my goodness, that seems like a very serious topic to do a time for all ages for. Yeah, I suppose so. Well, okay, so how do we handle this? Why don't we sing a happy song? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's sing a song. Given the topic, let's sing a song about gender socialization. What? That just seems really specific. Well, do you remember when you were in a toy store? Yes, Emma remembers being up on a shelf. And do you remember how the toy store was arranged? Yeah, let's see, there was a pink section for girls and a blue section for boys. Seems strange and arbitrary to Elmo. Well, let's sing a song about that then. It's not easy being blue. There's so many things that you're not supposed to do, like have feelings, be gay, eat quiche, or cry. Emma understands. And it's not easy being pink. You're judged by how you look, not how you think. And you're paid less and abused and harassed when you walk by. You got it, Elmo. And we changed keys, but that's a better key for me. So I think we can both agree. This system's bad for you and me. This certainly has room for improvement. So let's join the feminist movement. And it's not easy, social change. You get made fun of, you get called names. When gender roles you try to rearrange. And it's women who've built the bridge. It's men who have male privilege. So men should listen to women for a change. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kermit and Elmo, for that Time for All Ages story. I wonder who does those voices. Anyway, please be sure to check out the UU St. Pete Weekly, our spectacular newsletter for announcements of the many things happening at the church. But this is the time in our worship service for joys and concerns. If you're watching YouTube live, please go back to the text chat. Go ahead and type in your joys and concerns into the text chat. And let's again take a moment of silence for this portion of the worship service. In our congregation, I'm told we use stones for the joys and concerns. So our first stone will be a stone of concern. It's from Sabina von Auloch, who says that she is concerned that members of the UUSP community who have felt disengaged due to the pandemic. And I'll follow that up with another stone from Sabina, and this is a stone of joy. Sabina says, we are a community who cares deeply for each other, and she says they've helped me connect, and I'm also committed to broadening and deepening those connections with Sabina's help. So in 2 weeks, I will take my ministry on the road and visit some of our members who prefer the face-to-face experience. If you'd like a visit or know of someone who would benefit from a visit, please let Sabina or me know. So this is a stone of joy for this method of connection. Next, a stone of concern for our Friday homeless picnic volunteer, Brian Heberlin. Brian was in an accident, but I just saw this wonderful picture of him. He looks like he's well on the way to recovery. He's expected to recover 100%, and he is going to be volunteering at this week's homeless picnic. So our wishes for your continued recovery, Brian. Another stone of concern for today's worship associate. Jamie Gray was taken to the hospital this week for symptoms of stroke. Jamie's home now and recovering, and we hope you heal very well. And then, one final stone for those joys and concerns that you have just put in the text chat, and also for those that remain in our hearts, perhaps yet too tender to be spoken aloud. Let us take one more moment of silence together. The mystery is that we are connected, even when we feel apart. So let us rejoice in our beloved community that makes of the many one. So may it be.
We must all unite, for we are one creation. We must join the fight, together we are strong. We must do what's right in every situation. Love each other's lives as you would do your own. Just think twice before you cast your soul at someone's soul. Is their life? And so the choice is theirs and theirs alone. We're not here to judge, we are here to love. There's no room for hate. We are just one human race. We must rise above. We are here to love. There's no time to waste anymore. We must all unite. There's no more segregation.
When you've seen the light, there's nowhere else to go.
And with peace in sight, no walls to separate us.
we would be as one because this earth's our home. Just think twice before you cast your stone at someone's soul. It's their life, and so the choice is theirs and theirs alone. We're not here to judge, we are here to love. There's no room for hate. We are just one human race. We must rise above. We are here to love. There's no time to waste anymore. Will we learn from our past? Our clock is running fast. We're not here to judge. We are here to love. There's no room for hate. We are just one human race. We must rise above. We are here to love. There's no time to waste anymore.
We must rise above. We are here to love. Thank you so much, One City Chorus, for that beautiful performance. I look forward to seeing you perform live as soon as it is safe to do so. We must rise above. We are here to love. My friend Kamla Basine once referred to love as her favorite four-letter word. So much better than the other four-letter words that are sometimes used in the English language. Kamla was a feminist, warrior poet, children's book author, and director of the 1 Billion Rising movement in South Asia. Kamla also gifted me with her friendship when we met in India many years ago, and I got to visit her a few times since then, the last time in 2019, and I did not know that it would be the last time. The great Kamla Basine passed away this week, and I already miss her. Our worship service today marks October Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Sharon Wood and I received a flag from CASA, our local domestic violence program. Now, purple is the color of domestic violence awareness. So to support CASA's efforts to turn St. Pete purple, Sharon and I put the flag on the front door of our church. If we could, we would also replace those large outdoor light bulbs with purple light bulbs, or maybe just put in purple gels on top of the outdoor lights, so that at night our church would glow purple. In the meantime, we're doing our best. They gave us one purple light bulb, and Sharon's going to buy a second one. At least the front two bulbs will be purple. So the very front of our church will be turned purple for the month of October. But if any of you wants to help me turn the whole church purple with those larger lights, please let me know. As I mentioned at the beginning, by the time you hear this worship service, many of us will have walked together on the St. Pete Women's March. And for most of us, it was not our first march. For myself, I walked one time 3,700 miles on a march from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. This was in 1986, and it was called the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament. Almost 1,000 of us walked from all 50 states, 12 different countries, people of all ages, backgrounds. I was 19 years old at the time, and in many ways, the march shaped who I would become as an adult, as an activist, now as a minister. Also, it seems, as a person who would lose most of his hair. But spending every day walking for peace, surrounded by committed activists, for me was a wonderful way to spend 9 months. I'm still in touch with many of the friends I met on the Peace March, and a lot of them talked and taught me about race, about gender, about class, certainly about nuclear arms and disarmament. And some of them taught me about Unitarian Universalism. But the women of the Women's Collective taught me about feminism and taught me about violence against women. These women then, and many survivors and advocates since, have educated me. They've challenged me, and they've guided me in the wonderful intersectional feminist movement to end domestic violence. One woman on the Great Peace March was named Liz Merrick. She's the second one from the left in that middle row with the big glasses. And Liz taught me that every 15 seconds in the United States, a man abuses the woman he's promised to love. Liz taught me that every 2 minutes in the United States, a man rapes a woman. It's usually a woman that he knows. Now, on the Peace March, Liz and I were both members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. So Liz also taught me that abuse happens in our community and that it happens to men at the hands of women. But the vast majority of domestic and sexual violence, she and others have taught me, is committed by men. Liz also taught me about her daily life. She was a survivor of male violence, but much more frequently, Liz endured daily violence, what we now call microaggressions. Liz told me about men harassing her on the street while she walked to the laundromat. Told me about being paid less than men for doing the same work. Told me about men harassing her at that work and denying her promotions that lesser qualified men then received. Liz taught me domestic violence cannot exist without a culture that favors my gender over hers, favors whites over people of color, heterosexuals over LGBTQ people. These microaggressions are daily violence of sexist jokes, street harassment, workplace sexual harassment, interrupting women in meetings. These build a cultural foundation and systemic foundation for men's lives, for my life, to matter more than women's lives. Domestic violence, I was taught, cannot exist without the bottom of that pyramid. And conversely, cultivating healthy relationships and interrupting this daily violence creates a culture where domestic violence cannot flourish. So if we interrupt sexist jokes, if we pay women equally, if we stop street harassment, if we pass laws that guarantee women's reproductive freedom, if we cultivate healthy relationships, we chip away at the bottom of this pyramid, and eventually the whole thing will crumble. Now, maybe you prefer an iceberg model to a pyramid model. In this, the more overt forms of violence are visible above the water's surface. The daily violence, sexism, systems, and cultural violence are not. So let's say we do some good work to stop domestic violence and sexual violence, to prevent domestic murder. It's great, and we chip away at the top of the iceberg. What happens when you chip away at the top of an iceberg? It floats up, right? Most of it remains. So what if we warm the water? Not in a global warming way. That's a different worship service. What if we warm the water by celebrating and cultivating healthy relationships, by valuing what women and girls think, not just what they look like, by marching for women's reproductive rights, by writing books where girls and women are the heroes? What if we warm the water by electing a woman as the first president of the Unitarian Universalist Association? People sometimes ask me what my call to ministry was. And the question always seemed kind of strange, like, was it a call on the cell phone? So maybe now it's a text. But I think my call to ministry came from Liz Merrick on the Great Peace March, and from women like her since. Women like you in this congregation, several of you have had the courage to share with me that you have survived domestic violence. My call was from women like Linda Osmondson, who used to run CASA and unfortunately has passed since. I entered divinity school 3 years ago, but I think my ministry began over 30 years ago in 1986 when Liz and other women taught me about the extent of male violence and asked me to do something about it. Liz Merrick died on board the Pan Am 103 flight in Lockerbie, Scotland. I continue to do this work in Liz's memory, in Linda Osmondson's memory, in Kamla Bassine's memory, and in the memory of so many other women who have inspired me and taught me, in the memory of so many women who have died from acts of violence. I'm now learning to view the problem of male violence through our Unitarian Universalist principles. So how do we see this iceberg and our duty to melt it through the lens of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the lens of justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, the lens of respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part? In a week, Unitarian Universalists will celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. As male violence against Indigenous and Native women continues, how do we understand the suggested eighth principle of Unitarian Universalism, working to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions? Yes, October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Yes, domestic violence is rooted in a culture and a system of patriarchy. Yes, it happens every 15 seconds in this country, every 2 minutes in this country. But statistics like that and this concept of the whole system can be overwhelming. So I also wanted to tell you a story of one woman that I worked with in New Hampshire about 25 years ago, when I worked full-time at a place much like CASA. The woman agreed that I could tell her and her family's story. She and I came up with her pseudonym, Betty, which is actually my aunt's name. And I want to caution you, Betty's story does contain descriptions of violence. One day at our agency, I answered the phone. It was a local police department a few towns away, and they told us there was someone there that needed our help. I got in my car and drove to the town, found the police department, entered it, and right away I knew who Betty was, because she was sitting on one of those institutional couches, had been waiting for me for about 45 minutes. It was a while to get to this small town, and she had tissues all over the couch, and those tissues were red with blood. She rushed into my arms and gave me a hug and cried. She told me that her ex-husband had taken her and her kids on a drive and used the car to scare them. He drove recklessly and fast. She and her kids cried and pleaded with him to slow down. Finally, he agreed to stop at a rest area. Betty went inside to use the restroom. When she came outside, she saw her car driving away with her kids in it. She started running after the car, screaming, "My babies, my babies, don't take my babies." It was a hot summer day in New Hampshire. She'd gone into the bathroom without her shoes on. She was running on hot concrete, didn't even notice. The blood on the tissues was from her trying to heal her feet from the burns that she didn't realize she was receiving. I brought Betty back to our shelter, where we helped her clean up and wash her feet, put some bandages on, gave her some socks that had been donated, like I'm sure they donate socks to CASA, gave her some clothes, clean clothes that she could wear, worked with the state police department in New Hampshire to identify her car, and then within a day or so, they found the car. They arrested him. They brought the 3 kids back to Betty. She was reunited with her kids. These were great kids. I remember them vividly. We provided support groups for Betty, court advocacy, one-on-one counseling, and had services for the kids too. And I in particular remember Betty's 4-year-old daughter, who we'll call Rachel. Rachel was one of these kids who just absorbed any positive adult attention she could get. So every day I walked in to the office, she would run up to me, give me like a hug around my leg, and I looked forward to that. We learned from talking to Betty that her ex hadn't always been abusive. When he met her, he told her she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, told her he wanted to spend all of his time with her. He said they belonged together. But it turns out Betty's ex wanted her to belong to him in a possessive way. He called her and texted her when she came home late from work. His loving compliments faded when she did things he did not want her to do. His abuse was physical, but much more it was verbal. He called her stupid, called her ugly, called her lazy and crazy, called her a bad mother, called her fat. Betty told me the physical violence hurt, but it was the bruises you couldn't see that took the longest time to heal. I am a member of an international group called the White Ribbon Campaign. It's a campaign for men against violence against women. And years after I met Betty, I had moved to another state. The local White Ribbon Campaign held a domestic violence awareness vigil, and I was interviewed by a local television station. Guess who had moved to that state? Guess who saw the TV story? So Betty called the reporter, who passed on her number to me. I'm pretty bad with names, so I didn't know who this was, so I did that trick where you call and you listen to the voice and hope you recognize it. Okay, maybe that's just a trick I do, but she has a very distinctive voice, so right away I knew it was her, and it clicked, and I asked her how she was doing, and she was doing so much better. She had gotten a job, she had gotten into another support group, she was getting some job training, and then I heard a little girl voice in the background, and I said, "Is that Rachel?" And I heard a little girl voice saying, "Is that the guy with the really long hair?" And she put Rachel on the phone. Rachel told me about her life and her friends and her school. Their lives weren't perfect. No one's life is perfect, but they were better. They were better because of what we had done to help her, more than that, they were better because of their own choices, their own courage. Every day, we Unitarian Universalists have an opportunity to cultivate healthy relationships and create a world where women, children, and men are safe in their homes, safe at work, safe on the streets, safe in their relationships. Every day, the Bettys of the world are helped by our colleagues at CASA. The Women's March yesterday was one step in the right direction, but let us continue to cultivate healthy relationships, both romantic and platonic, both in our lives and within our congregation. Let us support organizations like CASA doing their frontline work every day. In a second, we'll get to share the plate with CASA. Let us work together until women, children, and all people are safe. Let's work together until gender-based violence doesn't happen every 15 seconds or every 2 minutes. Let's work together until it happens hardly at all. Amen, and blessed be. To keep our congregation thriving, let us remember our connection to one another, and let us not forget our contributions to support the means to those connections. Now, this Sunday, we are sharing the plate with CASA, the wonderful organization in St. Pete that I spoke about. It works to end domestic violence in our community. The first time I ever came to St. Pete many years ago, it was at the invitation of CASA's executive director, Linda Osmondson. She invited me to facilitate a conversation with her staff on the role of men in ending male violence. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the homily, Linda has left this world, but her influence and leadership clearly remain. So let us donate to support CASA's work in her name and in the name of all survivors of domestic violence. If you're watching today on a mobile device or your computer, please hover your finger or cursor in the upper right corner of your screen and click the I in the small white circle for a secure way to give. The link is also in the description box below. You can donate through the Vanco Faith Engagement Mobile Act that our treasurer Paul told us about last week, or on our website, uustpete.org, under the Giving tab, or by sending a check to the church. Many thanks for your contribution. Our chalice extinguishing today is by me. I really appreciate everyone's feedback on it, and keep the feedback coming. We extinguish this flame, but not the light that helps our eyes see injustice, nor the warmth that helps our heart feel connection, nor the fire that helps us commit to a better world. We will keep this light, warmth, and fire inside ourselves till we meet again. Thanks to everyone for coming this morning. I will not be able to join the Zoom coffee hour after this. The rest of the staff and I are on a field trip to my colleague's worship service at Allendale United Methodist Church. We're seeing how they do their multi-platform worship. They've been kind enough to let us observe and see what we can learn from them. I hope you stay for the coffee hour. The meeting information will be on your screen shortly. Please stay safe. Hope to see you soon.